Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, President Trump secures over $240 billion in investments from Qatar. That's as the president continues his Middle East tour. The deals include Qatar purchasing nearly $100 billion in Boeing planes. Jack Bradley has more on these historic agreements. HHS Secretary RFK Jr. says he's working hard to bring critical medicine production back to the U.S. to minimize the dangers of relying on China. As part of his budget proposal, California Governor Gavin Newsom aims to halt healthcare expansion for low-income illegal immigrants. We'll break down the reasons behind the freeze and who will be impacted. A legal battle over a historic national security law intensifies, with the Trump administration securing a judicial win in Pennsylvania. And lawmakers on Capitol Hill worked overnight to mark up details in the GOP's new budget. Medicaid is at the center of the debate. Melina Weisskopf has the latest.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. President Trump today becomes the first U.S. president to make an official state visit to Qatar. While there, Trump secured billions in investments for the U.S. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has the details.
We are going to another level of relationship between Qatar and the United States.
President Trump announcing over $240 billion in economic deals between the U.S. and Qatar. That includes Qatar buying 210 airplanes from America's Boeing, worth about $96 billion. The other deals focus on defense and the purchase of military drones.
The United States is in a very strong position militarily. We have the best equipment anywhere in the world. You're buying a lot of that equipment, actually. And I think
Qatar has played a mediator role in the release of hostages from Gaza. The leader of Qatar also recently offered a 747 aircraft as a gift to the U.S. Trump also met with the new leader of Syria, a first for a U.S. president in over 25 years. That's after Trump announced on Tuesday that he would lift sanctions on Syria. Syria has been through years of war and a recent regime change. Trump also asked Syria, like he asked of Saudi Arabia on Tuesday, to establish diplomatic ties with Israel by signing on to the Abraham Accords.
But I think they have to get themselves straightened out. I told him, I hope you're going to join when it's straightened out. He said yes. But they have a lot of work to do.
Trump's set to meet with leaders of the United Arab Emirates on Thursday, but he may take a detour from his Middle East trip to fly to Turkey because on the same day, Putin and Zelensky are expected to meet for peace negotiations in the Russia-Ukraine war. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is attending those, and Zelensky is also there as we speak, so it depends on whether Trump's presence will ensure that Putin will attend these talks.
he would like me to be there, and that's a possibility. If we could end the war, I'd be thinking about it. So we have a very full situation. Now, that doesn't mean I wouldn't do it to save a lot of lives and come back. But, yeah, I think they're thinking about something. I don't know that he would be there if I'm not there.
Prior to Trump heading to the UAE, that country's leaders have committed to invest $1.4 trillion in the U.S. over the next decade. Now, this targets AI, semiconductor infrastructure, the energy sector, and manufacturing. Reporting by Jack Bradley, NTD News.
Israeli forces report striking a Hamas command center beneath a hospital in the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, in Syria, many residents were seen celebrating after President Trump said the U.S. would lift sanctions on the country. NTD's Jason Perry has the story and a warning. This report includes content that some viewers may find disturbing.
Israeli forces recently reported striking Hamas terrorists and dismantling a Hamas command and control center underneath a hospital in the Gaza Strip. And Israel says they took numerous steps before the strike to mitigate harm to civilians. But a security camera video released on Wednesday shows several people, including a child, walking near the location moments before a reported Israeli airstrike hit the area. Many of them ran for cover right before the strike hit. Large craters were seen in the ground around the hospital following the Israeli airstrikes. An employee at the hospital explained what happened.
I was sitting with my colleagues, we were having tea. Suddenly, an explosion happened in all of the hospital. A missile landed here in front of it. This is an ICU, intensive care. There's become no safety in hospitals or anywhere.
Israeli forces are increasing operations in the Gaza Strip, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the war won't stop even if Hamas releases hostages.
Maybe Hamas will say, hold, we want to free 10 more hostages. Okay, bring them. We'll take them, and then we'll go in. But there will be no way we will stop the war. We can make a ceasefire for a certain period of time, but we're going to the end.
Israel also continues to defend itself against missiles launched from the Iran-backed Houthi terrorist group in Yemen. On Wednesday, a Houthi spokesman said the group fired a missile at Israel's main airport. Sirens sounded in Jerusalem, and the Israeli military said they intercepted a missile that was fired from Yemen. No injuries were reported. Meanwhile, in Syria, residents were seen celebrating in the streets after President Trump said he was going to lift sanctions on the country. Some residents shared their thoughts.
What we hope for and expect is for investments to return to Syria and for the economy to pick up again.
This is a second happiness and a second liberation. The sanctions will be lifted, which means a revival is coming. We will no longer have crises, no more water crisis, no more economic crisis.
Trump also said that his administration has taken the first steps toward restoring normal relations between the U.S. and Syria for the first time in more than a decade. Jason Perry, NTD News.
Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. says that reducing dependency on China for critical medicines is a priority for him and the Trump administration. NTD correspondent Jason Blair has more from Kennedy's testimony on Capitol Hill.
They're directly and narrowly focused on creating dominance across the globe.
During a House committee meeting, HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. agreed when asked if over-relying on China for critical pharmaceuticals poses a threat.
We saw the problem with supply chain control by the Chinese during COVID, and this is a priority for me and for this administration.
RFK Jr. says that they've been working hard to bring more medicine production into the U.S. and that he's been meeting with pharmaceutical CEOs.
I've met repeatedly with Eli Lilly, which is now building 9 facilities, 9 factories in this country.
Kennedy says that China also has a program called the 1,000 Talents Program that is designed to steal U.S. IP and technology.
And we have facilitated that at NIH by funding Chinese scientists with contracts that don't require them even to report their science back to our country, but they give it directly to Chinese military scientists on bioweapons research that we gave them the technology for.
After testifying in front of the House Appropriations Committee, Kennedy was a witness in a second hearing in front of the Senate. He was interrupted by protesters during his opening statement.
The witness will suspend. The committee will come to order.
The protesters were promptly removed by Capitol Police. Secretary Kennedy also brought up his plan to onshore more critical medicine production while at his hearing with the Senate. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
Lawmakers on Capitol Hill worked overnight marking up a bill that details Medicaid cuts. This is the most touchy aspect of Republicans' new budget. Other controversial proposals include cuts from food stamps and tax changes. NTD's Melina Weiskup has the latest.
Cancer patients.
In an overnight hearing on Capitol Hill, Democrats accused Republicans of gutting Medicaid to cover the cost of tax cuts for the wealthy.
Republicans are stealing health coverage from 14 million Americans so that Trump's buddies can get another tax break. That's the trade-off, working Americans for these guys.
Republicans, however, say their goal is to preserve Medicaid's funds for the most vulnerable and cut taxes for the working class.
We're making sure that there are going to be work requirements so that able-bodied adults are truly in need of it. That's what we're doing. We're stabilizing this program. To insinuate, to fearmonger that we are trying to kick people off is simply untrue.
The Republicans' bill would require able-bodied recipients to work, volunteer, or pursue education. It also targets illegal immigrants on the program. People would need to prove they are eligible twice a year.
We are prepared to stop the billions of dollars of waste, fraud, and abuse in the Medicaid program by beginning to rein in the loopholes, by ensuring states have the flexibility to remove ineligible recipients from their rolls, and removing beneficiaries who are enrolled in multiple states.
Republicans are also proposing cuts to Medicaid reimbursements for organizations like Planned Parenthood. The hearing at times got heated. Capitol Police on Tuesday removed at least 25 protesters. Another federal subsidy on the chopping block is food stamps. The GOP's budget proposes to cut down on taxpayers' contribution to the program, making work requirements to get them and requiring states to share more of the cost. Meanwhile, in another committee, tax changes are in limbo.
It's a process, right? So step by step by step, we're getting there, and the time's of the essence, and everybody knows that.
The Speaker has been negotiating with lawmakers from high-tax states to help ease the state and local tax burdens for Americans living in those high-tax states like New York. A deal could be announced as soon as today. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
California's healthcare access for illegal immigrants may soon look different. Governor Gavin Newsom is proposing changes he says are needed to address rising costs and a growing budget gap. NTD's Christina Corona tells us more.
Governor Gavin Newsom is proposing to stop enrollment for low-income immigrants without legal status in California's state-funded healthcare program, Medicaid, starting in 2026. He unveiled the plan Wednesday while announcing the state's $12 billion budget deficit.
$5 billion on a freeze on our Medicaid expansion. We're not cutting or rolling back those that are enrolled in our Medicaid system. We're just capping it, particularly for those without documentation.
Under Newsom's proposal, low-income illegal immigrant adults will no longer be able to sign up for Medicaid starting in 2026. Those already enrolled can keep their coverage, and the freeze will not affect children. Then in 2027, adults with unsatisfactory immigration status on Medicaid will also have to pay a $100 monthly premium.
Monthly premiums, we believe that people should have some skin in the game as it relates to contributions. So we are looking to a monthly premium that would generate through that program.
This comes after the program ended up costing $2.7 billion more than expected. However, in March, Newsom said he wasn't planning to cut health benefits for low-income illegal immigrants, even as the state faced a $6.2 billion Medicaid shortfall. California was one of the first states to offer full health coverage to low-income illegal immigrant adults, which was a key part of Newsom's push toward universal care. The program remains entirely state-funded without using federal dollars. The $100 premium aligns with what individuals pay for subsidized plans through the state's marketplace. Altogether, the governor's office estimates the changes will save California $5.4 billion by the 2028-2029 fiscal year. Newsom says the cuts are needed to balance the budget while protecting key priorities in his final years. It's unclear how Democrats who control the legislature will respond. The final budget proposal must be signed by June. Reporting from the city of Los Angeles, Christina Corona, NTD News.
A legal fight over one of America's oldest national security laws is heating up. The Trump administration just won a key victory in Pennsylvania. Here are the details.
It's a good one.
A federal judge in Pennsylvania has ruled that President Trump can invoke the Alien Enemies Act, an 18th century wartime statute, to deport migrants suspected of gang ties. The ruling from U.S. District Judge Stephanie Haynes marks the first judicial support for Trump's use of the law, putting her at odds with 3 other federal judges in Texas, Colorado, and New York. Trump invoked the law in March, targeting members of Tren de Aragua, or TDA, a Venezuelan gang he labeled a foreign terrorist group and accused of invading the U.S. In the Pennsylvania case, Judge Haynes found that TDA's action meet the law's definition of a predatory incursion. Her ruling applies only to detainees in western Pennsylvania, including a Venezuelan national held near Phillipsburg. But the judge also acknowledged civil rights concerns, ordering that detainees must be given 21 days' notice in English and Spanish, and a chance to challenge deportation in court. The ACLU, which has filed lawsuits across the country, says it will appeal the ruling. In a separate legal battle, a state judge in Wisconsin was indicted by a federal grand jury after allegedly helping an illegal immigrant evade arrest. Judge Hannah Dugan of Milwaukee County was indicted on 2 federal charges, obstruction and concealing an individual to prevent arrest. The charges stem from an incident in April when federal agents arrived at the courthouse to arrest Eduardo Flores Ruiz, a previously deported Mexican national facing domestic violence charges. Dugan allegedly confronted the agents, demanded they leave, and then escorted Flores Ruiz and his lawyer through a jury door, a private exit normally reserved for court staff and in-custody defendants. Agents caught up with Flores Ruiz outside the building after a brief foot chase, and he was taken into custody. Dugan was later arrested by the FBI and released on her own recognizance. She faces up to 6 years in federal prison if convicted on both counts. The Wisconsin Supreme Court has since suspended her from the bench, saying it was necessary to protect public confidence in the judiciary. Judge Dugan denies wrongdoing, and her lawyers say she looks forward to being vindicated in court. Meanwhile, the Trump administration is ramping up its immigration enforcement efforts, with federal agents making major arrests across the country. In Washington, D.C., 189 individuals were arrested last week in a targeted operation focusing on violent offenders. Interim U.S. Attorney Ed Martin warns that the city's sanctuary policies are undermining local law enforcement's ability to keep D.C. safe.
D.C. local leadership, the council and others, has made D.C. a sanctuary city. We're all familiar with that. But the cost of that is something that is paid by the citizens. And I warn you, as we've looked more and more at the sanctuary city provisions, that it is crippling law enforcement in their effort, local law enforcement, to make sure to keep D.C. safer.
Meanwhile, in Nashville, 196 suspected illegal immigrants were arrested in a similar operation, with 95 having prior criminal convictions or pending charges. Nashville's Mayor Freddie O'Connell has criticized federal raids and emphasized the trauma caused to local communities. This week, he signed an order requiring his office to track and report interactions with federal immigration authorities.
Tomorrow, the Supreme Court will hear arguments over whether local district courts can issue nationwide injunctions. The Trump administration has asked the court to lift injunctions on its policy to end birthright citizenship. NTD's Arlene Richards explores potential impacts if the court agrees.
In less than 24 hours, the Supreme Court will listen to the Trump administration's arguments over why they think district courts cannot issue nationwide injunctions. So far, around 39 district court rulings have blocked a number of the president's executive orders, including his policy to limit birthright citizenship. 3 district courts in Maryland, Massachusetts, and Washington issued overlapping nationwide injunctions on the administration's new birthright citizenship policy. Trump had signed an executive order preventing children born in the U.S. to illegal immigrants or those in a lawful temporary status from being recognized as citizens. But historically, the government has permitted a child born to any immigrant in the U.S., regardless of their status, to automatically become a citizen. Although the cases being reviewed involve birthright citizenship, the justices will focus on the power of judges to make blanket rulings that apply across the country. The administration's attorney contended in a court filing that nationwide injunctions are beyond the court's constitutional powers and interfere with the president's ability to carry out his functions. In a court filing, the attorney wrote, "This court should declare that enough is enough before district courts' burgeoning reliance on universal injunctions becomes further entrenched." The attorney urged the justices to strictly limit enforcement of the universal injunctions to the individual plaintiffs challenging the policy in the 3 cases. Plaintiffs in the cases, including non-citizen pregnant women, have argued the new policy violates the 14th Amendment. Several legal experts believe Trump's policy will ultimately be struck down. But on the issue of nationwide injunctions, the Trump administration could receive a favorable ruling. For example, in January, the Biden administration also asked the court to weigh in on nationwide injunctions as part of an emergency appeal. In a quick ruling, the majority agreed to lift a federal judge's injunction, which blocked the government from enforcing a law. But they didn't directly address the question of nationwide injunctions. Justice Neil Gorsuch wrote a separate opinion in which he indicated that he would have resolved the injunction question definitively. Trump's executive order was scheduled to go into effect 30 days after he signed it. If the majority rules in favor of the current administration, it would allow the government to partially implement its policy, even as litigation continues and more people file similar cases. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
Coming up, Beijing criticizes the U.S.-UK trade deal. A clause in the agreement could see Chinese products excluded from UK supply chains to protect U.S. national interests. Malcolm Hudson reports from London. And the House Foreign Affairs Committee examines what the State Department for the 21st century should look like in the East Asia-Pacific region. Luis Martinez has more on that after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Beijing is criticizing a clause in the U.S.-UK trade deal which could see Chinese products excluded from UK supply chains. The clause is meant to safeguard U.S. national interests by upholding high economic security standards. NTD's international correspondent Malcolm Hudson has more for us from London.
China has criticized the trade deal between the United States and the United Kingdom. The key point here is a clause which could push Chinese products out of British supply chains to stop them entering America. Signed last week, the US-UK trade deal includes strict security requirements for British steel and pharmaceutical industries, meaning these goods should not be exported from Britain to America if they originally came from China. This stops the UK being a backdoor for circumventing America's trade and security measures. The clause seeks to safeguard US national interests. It could also involve blocking Chinese takeovers of British companies. Britain's last remaining steelworks, British Steel, was bought by Chinese investment firm Jingye in 2020. But last month, the British government intervened after Jingye tried to close the loss-making steelworks down. If the furnace had shut, Britain would be the only leading European country unable to make its own steel, and would instead depend on imports, such as from China. Beijing has opposed the trade deal clause as detrimental to China. It says trade clauses like these pressure nations into excluding Chinese products. The statement poses a challenge for the British government, which has been seeking to rebuild its relationship with China. High-level talks between Britain and China resumed last year, following years of little contact under the previous administration. In January, the two reached agreements worth around $730 million to the UK over the next 5 years. A British government spokesperson defended the US trade deal, saying it secures thousands of British jobs across key sectors and lays the groundwork for greater trade in the future. The deal removes the 25% tariff rate on UK steel and aluminium exports, while giving America's agricultural industry greater access to British markets. It drops the tariff on British cars down to 10% for the first 100,000 vehicles exported to the US, though the baseline 10% rate on most goods remains in place. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News, London.
The House's Foreign Affairs held a hearing this Wednesday to examine the role of the State Department in advancing U.S. national economic security in the East Asia and Pacific region. Our Washington correspondent Luis Adoro Martinez has more on the story.
In 2022, Russia again invaded Ukraine and started a war that killed hundreds of thousands of soldiers and civilians. Somehow, once again, we were unprepared. The Arab Spring blossomed and died without meaningful U.S. economic support. Venezuelan elections were stolen, and a handful of officials are sanctioned. A coup overthrows democracy in Myanmar, and America's enormous economic power sits idle. Over and over, the U.S. responds to global crises with a fragmented toolkit.
Lawmakers discussed the merits of using U.S. economic power to advance national economic interests in the East Asia Pacific region, but questioned whether the State Department is equipped and structured to wage economic war on U.S. adversaries. NTD spoke with the chairwoman of the House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on East Asia Pacific region on the threats to the United States' interests coming from that region.
Well, currently there is a lot of flashpoints going on in the Indo-Pacific region, and there is a constant threat of Chinese Communist Party trying to overtake Taiwan. But most important threat is the economic insecurity or economic instability.
Democratic lawmakers highlighted their disagreement with President Trump's methods to reform the State Department, but agreed with Republicans that Congress has a historic opportunity to modernize U.S. diplomacy and advance national economic interests.
I do think it is incredibly important to have economics as part of the State Department, to have representatives around the world within our embassies out there promoting U.S. goods, products, working with our companies to help them navigate, foreign markets and so forth.
Going there and just talking about we value you, we trust you, and we want you to be our friends is not good enough. We need to follow those words with actions and actually bringing some of our serious U.S. Private sector investments.
Democrats and Republicans agreed that the U.S. foreign policy needs more follow-through with its allies in the East Asia Pacific region in this transformational time in the world economy.
there is not one agency that is really focused on economic conversation. We have USTR that is acting as a separate agency, and then there is a whole list of other dozens of agencies without the coherent coordination.
Republicans and Democrats disagree on President Trump's tariff policy, with Democrats arguing that they negatively impact U.S. companies and Republicans advocating their use as the preeminent tool in a new era of national economic security power projection. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
Coming up in analysis of President Trump's Middle East trip so far, from his meeting today with Syria's leader, a former member of al-Qaeda, and the many deals he's making. Should elected officials face charges after a clash with law enforcement? We'll get reaction from people in D.C. on the arrest of New York Mayor Ras Baraka. That and more when we return. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Now, a progress report on President Trump's first trip to the Middle East. Like much of his presidency, it involves a lot of deals and surprises. One of which was his meeting today with Syria's leader, a former member of al-Qaeda, urging him to normalize relations with Israel. That happened after Trump announced he would lift sanctions on Syria. His actions are even drawing some support from congressional Democrats. Joining me now to discuss all of this is David Wormser, Middle East Affairs Analyst at the Center for Security Policy and Foreign Policy Specialist. David, thank you so much for joining us. Now, a slew of developments coming out of Trump's Middle East trip. As mentioned above, Trump's lifting sanctions on Syria and met with the current leader who calls himself a reformed terrorist. How big of a change in diplomacy is this on Trump's part? What are his goals here?
Well, I think he did it somewhat as a favor to the Saudis. The Saudis really were pushing for this, and there wasn't an overarching reason that he saw to completely stiff the Saudis on it. So while there's grave reservations, and those are, first of all, his terrorist past, Shara, the leader of Syria's terrorist past, number one, and number two, the fact that Syria is a divided country, it's not unified. So when Trump met Shara, he essentially said, listen, I'm willing to work with you. He said it in very diplomatic ways, and it was very kind, but he said, listen, I'll work with you, but you got to put your country together, and you're on probation. So he did lift the sanctions, but they can be reimposed if necessary. So I think this was more what he was giving the Saudis. And he walked into something he may have realized, he may not have realized, I'm not sure. But it was really a very aggressive power play by the Saudis against the Qataris, who are at strategic odds with each other. This was really in the backdrop to this. The backstory to this is that the Saudis were trying to outdance the Qataris.
I want to get to that, but first, how likely are we to see Syria sign on to the Abraham Accords?
I don't think it's going to be very soon. Very soon. First of all, Syria, the government only controls 40% of the country. Number one. Number two, the minorities are gravitating toward Israel. So there's some tension between Syria and Israel over the minorities. The Israelis are protecting now the Christians to some extent, certainly the Druze and some of the others. So I think it's a long time coming before Syria is put together and Syria is in a comfortable state to deal with Israel. Then you have the strategic overlay where Syria is part of a larger strategic battle. And that may be more the key to what drives the Abraham Accords in the long run. But for the moment, Syria is way too much of a political football to initiate and join those accords.
Now, with Trump's Middle East, trip, how do you see this fitting in with his strategy for dealing with Iran? Because, for instance, we heard in Trump's speech with the Saudis that he doesn't believe in permanent enemies, signaling a softening on Tehran, but reiterating that the U.S. will not allow it to have a nuclear weapon. How are you reading that?
Yeah, it's a great question, Tiffany. I think what happened here is that there's a number of reasons why he went to Qatar and Saudi Arabia. UAE is kind of with Saudi Arabia. So by bringing Qatar and Saudi Arabia into this happy family, and again, I think in the long run, it's not such a happy family. I think Qatar and Saudi Arabia have two very different agendas and are not very friendly to each other. But nevertheless, the strategy here, I think, was If you get Qatar and Saudi Arabia, you pull them out of the Chinese orbit, which is protecting Iran. You pull them away from Iran, and you essentially isolate Iran in the region. And when you isolate Iran in the region, and then if you impose sanctions, Iran really starts facing binary choices. You're alone, you're sanctioned, you're blockaded, the Chinese can't help you, the rest of the region's abandoned you, and the Israelis are about to come after you. So you have a choice. Give up your nuclear program and join this happy family, or or pursue that, but then you're going to face the consequences. So I think that's really the Iran strategy behind some of this.
And I want to dig into some of those deals, or the happy family you just mentioned, because Trump did strike a deal with the Saudis. That's about $600 billion, and a $244 billion one with Qatar. You just mentioned they're very different, but how significant are these two deals, and how do you see that changing the dynamic in that region, maybe pulling away from China, for instance?
Oh, they're very big. I mean, they really make America the economic focal point of these massive economic powers, these oil powers. We haven't even seen yet what's going to be unveiled in the UAE in the next 2 days, but that will probably add a considerable amount to this total of purchases, consumption, and investment in the West, and specifically in the United States, America first, by these countries. I think if you add it all up, at the end of the day, we're talking close to $2 trillion worth of deals and investments and arms sales that will come out of this trip. That's an awful lot of money to infuse in the American economy. And it really helps the president with his America First agenda, especially to get through the immediate period of offsetting the damage done by tariffs until the longer term gains of the tariffs would kick in, according to what he believes.
Zooming out a bit here, during Trump's speech in Saudi Arabia, he criticized those he called neocons and interventionists, saying they messed up Middle East policy. What are your thoughts on all of that?
Yeah, he's really reacting to the Iraq War, and especially not just knocking Saddam out, which had its own strategic issues, but there were ways to do it. What he's really reacting to is that we sat there after the war, occupied Iraq, and had sort of we had a nation-building presence trying to rebuild Iraq, which became kind of an endless, bogged-down situation. The Iranians and Syrians were taking pot shots at us there, and we lost 4,000 or 5,000 soldiers doing this, which is a horrific price. And I think that's what he's really reacting to. So even if you have to do something, do it like what you did just now in Yemen. You go in, you send a signal, you destroy the enemy, or you make it clear to them there's a huge price to pay being in conflict with the United States. But don't go in, take over the country, have a semi-colonial presence to rebuild it, and take responsibility for the country. It's much more important to let them do that, let the Iranians do it, let the Iraqis do it, let the Yemenis do it. It's just something America can't do in that region. We're not Middle Eastern, and we don't play that game well.
David Wormser, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem accusing 3 Democrat lawmakers of committing felonies. This comes after a scuffle with law enforcement took place last week outside an ICE facility in Newark, New Jersey. Mayor Ras Baraka was arrested on trespassing charges during the incident. How are everyday people reacting to the story? NTD's Sam Wong was out on the National Mall in D.C. to hear from them.
The mayor of Newark was recently arrested for allegedly engaging in physical altercation with law enforcement while protesting outside of an ICE facility. What was your reaction upon hearing that?
There's no need to interfere with law enforcement. They're doing their job, and that's what they were sworn in to do.
If he got arrested, he must have been doing something wrong. Yeah. Simple as that.
If I was trespassing, they'd probably arrest me too.
I was stunned that these 3-4 people just think they have, the right to do what they want to do, despite the fact that they are in Congress. That doesn't give them the authority to walk in and do whatever they please to do.
We had a lot of Americans imprisoned after J6 for breaking laws. And so if our leaders and our lawmakers aren't going to follow the same laws that they want us to do, then I don't agree with that.
Do you think federal officials should face charges after engaging in physical altercations with law enforcement?
Yes. Anybody who engages anybody in physical altercation should get the benefits of that.
If they were supposedly breaking the law and they got arrested.
I would have to say that I would agree. We need to follow federal law, and we need to do what we're supposed to be doing. I love my blue. We back our blue. We love our police.
The law enforcement is there for a reason. No matter who you are, if law enforcement is there to keep everything on the straight and narrow, regardless of how they have to do it.
Elected officials are elected to do certain things. And they're not elected to do a lot of those things that they're trying to do. They can proceed to defend things if they don't think it was right, the legal way.
They're not elected to be police people, to intervene in what the police department is doing. That is not their job. If they would pay attention and do their job, things would not be the way they are.
Coming up in the NBA, with the Warriors facing elimination tonight, what's the status of injured guard Steph Curry? Dave Martin joins us to explain. And Shinyan Performing Arts 2025 World Tour has concluded with sold-out performances and rave reviews. The company's artistry captivated audiences all around the world. Find out what theatergoers had to say about the performance after the break. Now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, plenty going on today, but let's start in the NBA as the Golden State Warriors face the Minnesota Timberwolves tonight in Game 5. Now, it's been a week since Steph Curry's injury. What is his status for tonight?
Yeah, he's still out. Like you said, it's been a week. Now, he strained at hamstring Game 1. That was Tuesday night last week. They said they'd reevaluate him in a week. That was actually today. They said he was making good progress. And if they can make it to Game 6, he'll be reevaluated for that. That would be Sunday. But that's a big if, because right now they're down 3-1 after losing again 2 nights ago. I really thought they missed him in Game 4 as well, too. You know, they had that third quarter where Minnesota went way ahead. Curry, though, they really needed him to keep up because the Timberwolves on offense are really doing what they want against the Warriors defense. Kind of surprising there because the Warriors defense has been so good ever since they got Jimmy Butler. But of course, Curry on offense stretches the defense like no other player. I mean, he's the best outside shooter in the game. So right now, he's really dependent on his teammates to extend this series. Now also tonight, we've got Game 5 in Boston where the Knicks and Celtics will play. Knicks up 3-1 there. The game starts at 7 p.m. Eastern, so we could have 2 more teams into the conference finals tonight if Minnesota and New York both win.
Lots at stake. Well, last night, Indiana came back from a 19-point deficit to beat Cleveland and reach the Eastern Conference Finals. Now, these comebacks seem to be a theme this year.
Yeah, you know, Indiana pretty much did the same thing in Game 2 against Cleveland. They were down 20 points in the third quarter. They were even down 7 points in the final minute, somehow came back and won that game. Of course, the Celtics have been doing that to the Knicks this whole series, too. But let's actually listen to the 2 coaches of the Cleveland-Indiana game after last night's game.
Cleveland threw a whole game at us. You know, we were down 19, and you know, Ty's run of shot making in the second quarter got us back into it. And then you know, we just had a lot of guys that played extremely hard, and we just said, hey, let's hang in this thing, try to wear them down, and see if we can outlast them. And essentially, you know, that's what happened. You know, Toppin made some great plays at the end of the third. You know, Nembhard was clutch again. Ty was great. Pascal was great. And Miles had a couple of huge rebounds at the end. So really thrilled for our guys.
I'm going to go positive here in the sense that I do feel like we got better. And from a team aspect, and then we had a lot of individuals make a step. So I just want to make that clear. But the truth of the matter is we didn't get to the level we wanted to get to.
So Pacers into the conference finals, first team to reach that this year. Also last night, Oklahoma City beat Denver, despite Nikola Jokic scoring 44 points in that game. So now the Thunder are up 3-2 in that series, with Game 6 coming up on Thursday night. So that's where we stand with things in the NBA, Tiff.
Spicy. Well, shifting gears to golf, the PGA's second major, the PGA Championship, starts tomorrow. Who are some of the favorites to win?
You know, I would say the number one favorite is actually second-ranked Rory McIlroy. Now, McIlroy coming off that Masters win last month. He's actually got 3 wins already this year, but also because this is at Quail Hollow Club in Charlotte, North Carolina. Now, he's won this course 4 times, and this is where they usually play the Wells Fargo Championship. Now, according to him as well, he really feels like he's been, I guess, satisfied after winning the Masters and completing the career Grand Slam. Let's go ahead and listen to his comments about that.
Look, I've achieved everything that I've wanted. I've done everything I've wanted to do in the game. I dreamed as a child of becoming the best player in the world and winning all the majors. I've done that. So everything beyond this, for however long I decide to play the game competitively, is a bonus. I feel like I sort of burden myself with the career Grand Slam stuff, and I want to enjoy this. I want to enjoy what I've achieved, and I want to enjoy, the last decade or whatever of my career, and I don't want to burden myself by numbers or statistics, or I just want to go and try to play the best golf I can. And yeah, look, everyone needs to have goals and dreams, and I've been able to, do something that I dreamed of for a long time. I'm still going to set myself goals. I'm still going to try to achieve certain things, but I sit here knowing that very well could be the highlight of my career. So that's a very cool thing. I want to still create a lot of other highlights and high points, but I'm not sure if any other win will live up to what happened a few weeks ago.
So Scheffler obviously pleased, winning one of the few golfers to win the career Grand Slam a month ago. He's still playing great actually since then. Now, also, in addition to him, Scottie Scheffler, Justin Thomas, Bryson DeChambeau are probably some of the other favorites. But anyway, that starts tomorrow and goes through Sunday.
Well, looking at hockey news, we have a pair of NHL playoff games tonight, including the defending champion Florida Panthers taking on the Toronto Maple Leafs in Game 5.
Yeah, Florida-Toronto, Game 5, like you said, the series is tied at 2-2. Now, in a series tied at 2-2, in a best-of-7 set, the winner of Game 5 in NHL history has gone on to win in the series 79% of the time. So obviously a pivotal game tonight, and that's going to take place in Toronto. We also have Edmonton versus Las Vegas. That's going to be Game 5 in Las Vegas. Oilers can also clinch with a win. Now, last night, the Dallas Stars beat the Winnipeg Jets 3-1. So they lead that series 3-1. So kind of like the NBA, we got a lot of lopsided series here. I'm kind of disappointed. I was hoping we'd have more 2-2, but we could have some comebacks here. We'll see. I just haven't seen the comebacks yet, Just in individual games, not in the series, unfortunately.
Still looking for those Cinderellas.
Still looking for those Cinderellas, right.
Well, Dave, as always, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Tiff.
Shenyang Performing Arts has wrapped up its highly successful 2025 World Tour this week, reaching over 1 million audience members across more than 760 performances. This year's tour spanned major cities throughout the Americas, Europe, Asia, and Australia. Take a look.
You represent beauty, you represent the divinity of the human being, and the dance is exactly the expression of all this. Shenyang represents values of peace, solidarity, human understanding.
Former Argentine Vice President Carlos Ruckoff attended Shenyang's performance in Buenos Aires on April 17th.
I think the show is artistically excellent. I highly recommend watching it due to the level of the music, the soloists, and the dancing, and also due to its spiritual message, which is very important.
Herman Tersch, a member of the European Parliament from the Vox Party, felt that even 8 Shenyun companies were not enough to meet the global demand.
I'm told there's 8 already, 8 groups on stage all over the world. I wish there were 80, and I hope soon there will be 800. Beautiful show, magnificent, and also it's very inspiring to recover this magnificent effort to really bring back the authentic China, the spiritual China, the China of a 5,000-year-old culture.
Some cities welcomed Shenyun for the first time this season, including Riga, the capital of Latvia, marking the company's historic debut in a former Soviet Union country. Meanwhile, Paris hosted Shenyun's longest run, spanning from April through May.
Today, I came to see the remarkable Shenyun show. It's extraordinary. It's part dream, part enchantment. The color, the dance, the dreams, and the sets, everything is absolutely remarkable.
New York City's Lincoln Center hosted 18 sold-out Shenyun performances, with audiences praising the production's beauty and hopeful message.
So you're doing wonderful work, and I think it should be much appreciated and will be much appreciated around the world. People don't realize the contribution that has been there in the past, what is now, and what will be the future. The future of the world is in our hands. And we won't outlive it, but it will outlive us. And the good work that's being done like this will transcend time.
You can't watch this and not be happy. There is such happiness. Even though there is repression from communist China, there is an evolution through it. You know, humanity evolves beyond such dreadfulness. It's just happiness throughout.
Archbishop Makarios, head of the Greek Orthodox Church in Australia, attended Shenyun's performance in Sydney and later sent a letter praising the artists for their brilliant artistic revival of a divinely inspired culture. As Shenyun's popularity grows, performers and staff have faced increasing threats and harassment from the Chinese Communist regime. The company cannot perform in China as its mission is to show the world 5,000 years of traditional Chinese culture before communism. In February, a bomb threat forced the evacuation of the John F. Kennedy Center for Performing Arts on the morning of Shenyun's opening performance.
I found Shenyun was really a testimony to the true nature of what China could be if they were given an opportunity to be free, an opportunity to have a true Chinese culture that goes back thousands and thousands of years.
Despite such threats, audience enthusiasm for Shenyun remains strong as the company now prepares for an all-new production for 2026. NTD News.
NTD is a proud media sponsor of Shenyun. That's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.